Well, hi there. This is a leopard gecko, one of the most popular pet reptiles in the world. And this is a fat-tailed gecko, a less common alternative to the leopard gecko for people who want a leopard gecko, but that don't want to be just like everybody else. And there is a reason that these two geckos are popular. I mean, the leopard gecko is the highest scoring non-snake lizard that we have ever reviewed on this channel. Honestly, in retrospect, I might even give them an even higher score than I did. They're amazing. They're easy to handle and friendly. They're extremely hardy and relatively simple to care for. They're relatively inexpensive to buy and maintain. In many ways, they're the perfect pet lizard. Let's just face it, eyelid geckos make great pets. And just for the record, all geckos have eyelids. But what makes this group unique is that their eyelids can move. They can blink. More accurately, they can open their eyes. The eyelids on most geckos are fused shut and are clear. And interestingly, while leopard geckos, fat-tailed geckos, and probably banded geckos are the most well-known, the majority of the eyelid geckos are in the genus Goniurosaurus, the Asian cave geckos, which are at a glance every bit as amazing as their more well-known blinking cousins. I think a very strong case can be made that they're even more, dare I say it, beautiful than their cousins. Yet despite growing popularity, they are much less well known. So are these geckos as amazing to keep as their cousin? Or is there some hidden flaw that keeps them off the radar? And is the Asian cave gecko the best pet lizard for you? To help us answer these questions, we've invited our good friend Dr. Joey Muggleston from Great Basin Serpentarium, who keeps and breeds multiple species of cave geckos, here so that we can give cave geckos a score based on our 5 categories, which are handleability, care, hardiness, availability, and upfront costs. When it comes to handleability, we gave leopard geckos a score of 4 out of 5. And we also gave the fat-tailed gecko a score of 4 out of 5. They both had about the same pros and cons. In general, eyelid geckos are very good to handle, but not great. And really the main cons are that they're small enough that they can be injured fairly easily by rough or careless handling, say from a child. They can voluntarily drop their tails, though not as readily as geckos like crested geckos, and their tails, they don't grow back very well. And they aren't arboreal geckos, so they aren't exactly masters of holding on. They won't scratch you, but you will feel their claws. And while most don't tend to bite, for a lizard this small, they can pack a wallop. And they can poop on you, but generally don't. And they're small enough that it isn't like being pooped on by a beardy or a corn snake. So there are a lot of little things that make them less than ideal to handle, but none of those cons are a very big deal. In general, they're pretty calm, non-aggressive, and very tolerant of handling. And all those things are just as true about cave geckos as they are about their better-known cousins. They also get a 4 out of 5. Though I can see going to a 5, the reality is that there are a lot of reptiles that are not only more fun, but also can be handled more easily and with less risk to the animal. We're not here to hand out 5s like candy, and 4 still seems appropriate all these years later. When it comes to care and hardiness, we're going to turn the time over to Dr. Joey Muggleston from Great Basin Serpentarium, who keeps 5 different species of these geckos, to discuss the generalities and the differences between them.
So care for these guys is relatively simple. If you've kept a leopard gecko or seen how to keep a leopard gecko, it's basically that, just a little bit more humid. One of the key points is making sure you don't confuse humid with soggy. They don't need to be in wet conditions, they need to be a bit more humid. And so enclosure size for most of these, average size, depending on which species you get, is about 5 to 7 inches or so. And so caging size, you can do something like a 20-gallon terrarium. Of course, larger is better, and you can do a lot with these guys in terms of cool natural scape backgrounds and stuff like that. As for heat, they don't need to be quite as hot as some of the other geckos, and so we keep a warm spot of about about 84, 85 degrees. So about mid-80s on the warm side, and then they can be quite a bit cooler than that. They can actually handle quite a range of temperatures. When I first began keeping these years ago, I just kept them in Rubbermaid totes with damp substrate, and just in my reptile room that was mid-80s in the middle of the day. As for substrate, we do a mix. We have what we just refer to as a tropical mix. It's 2 parts peat moss, 2 parts topsoil, 1 part sand. You can use cocoa fiber or any other sort of substrate that's going to hold humidity well. All right, so inside the cage, you can have rocks and stuff for them to climb on. As was mentioned, they have those nice little claws that help them climb up on those rocks, grip onto those rocks, since they don't have the little sticky toe pads that you find in other geckos. Just make sure any accessories in the cage are well supported, that they're stuck in place, that the gecko can't move things around and have it shift and fall on them. Because we're in Utah and it is so dry here, we go through a few times a week and we'll mist the enclosure. We make sure we keep a corner of the cage always with some damp moss or a humid hide box, so that even if the rest of the cage were to dry out a little bit, they still have a nice humid area to go and retreat into. We keep a water dish in there at all times, just a shallow water dish that if they or any of their insect prey crawl into, they can get back out of it. So we keep the little food dish full of either dubia roaches of appropriate size or small mealworms for them to feed as they desire. And we go through twice a week and we make sure they have some food in there. And then about twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week, we'll go through and put small crickets in there for them as well. We dust it with calcium, vitamin D3. We don't provide UV lights for these guys. In our enclosures, they're heated by heat cable, and so we make sure they get that vitamin D through their diet. As for cage mates, we put cave geckos together only to make baby cave geckos. We keep them solitary year-round. We don't keep more than 1 female per cage. I've heard you can. We've not yet tried it. We've seen no reason to try it. We keep them individually, and then we put males in for breeding, and then we pull them back out once they're done. On the babies, you have to be careful on humidity. You got to watch when they're shedding. If when they shed, they don't get it all off their toes, we'll put them in a little humid box and then help them with that so that they don't have any issues there. So just watch the toes when they're young. When they get older, we don't notice as much of an issue with that. It's just some of the babies tend to be a bit more sensitive to it. Again, that's related to humidity. If you live in a humid area, that may make absolutely no sense to you because you won't see the same thing. Their hardiness is like most other Eublepharid geckos, and so if you've seen leopard geckos or kept leopard geckos, it's about the same. Again, as long as you make some minor modifications, a little bit less heat, a little bit more humidity, they're just as hardy as the other eyelid geckos, or the more popular eyelid geckos, I should say. There are a few of them that are more common. And so the most common of all the cave geckos is the Chinese cave gecko. That's Goniurosaurus hainanensis. That's the one we have in the dish here because he doesn't want to sit in my hands. They're the ones that will generally can find them around $100 to $200, maybe a little bit more if they have prettier banding or something. But they're the easiest to find. They are the most readily available, and they're kind of intermediate size for as far as cave geckos go. You do have some that are a bit smaller, like the one in my hand here. This is the Bawangling cave gecko, which is just fun to say. So Goniurosaurus bawanglingensis gets a little bit smaller, but care is exactly the same. And then the Vietnamese cave gecko, the one on my right hand, this is Goniurosaurus araneus. And this one and Goniurosaurus Lehi, they look about the same. They're a little bit longer than the other cave geckos, a little bit skinnier bodies, longer, goofier legs. Again, care is exactly the same. They just get a little bit longer. As far as availability, this is the most common. Bawang is pretty common now. There's a number of us working with them. Araneus, Lehi, and the others are a bit harder to come by. They'll cost a bit more money. And then you have the species from Japan. They're a little bit harder to come by right now, and so they will be a bit more expensive, but care is about the same, just a little bit cooler in temperatures. So Goniurosaurus, at least the hainanensis and similar species, were imported quite a bit, and that explains somewhat the lower price on that species. But in recent years, they have been, their status has changed with CITES, and so there's been a decrease in importing these things. And so unless more people get involved with captive breeding these lizards, they may become less readily available over the next few years. So if you're interested in keeping them, I highly encourage you to get unrelated lines and try your hand at making baby cave geckos.
Thank you very much, Joey. And with that in mind, we're going to give the cave gecko a score of 5 out of 5 for care and 5 out of 5 for hardiness. So I'm going to be totally honest with you guys. Somehow, reviews of pets have become the least popular videos on our channel. And reviews of pet reptiles have become the least popular pet reviews that we do on this channel. And yet, there are so many rad reptiles out there, some of them are even very common, that I haven't been able to share with you guys yet. And I will tell you, from an economics standpoint, it doesn't make sense for us to make these videos anymore. But I believe in this library that we're building, and I want to see it continue to grow. And we can only continue to do this, really, thanks to the support of our patrons on Patreon. So if this is the kind of thing you want to see us continue to do in the future, please consider hopping over there and supporting us on some level. It really does make a big difference and allows us to make videos that we know might not be that popular, but that need to be made. When it comes to availability, this is where things go down for a cave gecko versus a leopard gecko. But if you ask me, that's really part of their charm. If you don't care about the fact that they're everywhere, why not just get a leopard gecko? But truth be told, if you don't care which species you get, it isn't really that difficult to find a cave gecko, at least not yet. Though they will probably get a little bit harder to find in the near future, for the reasons that Joey already explained. While they aren't that common in pet shops, I certainly have seen them in pet shops. The same goes for expos. You won't see tables full of them like leopard geckos, but they're out there. And if you're willing to get one online, straight from a breeder, you shouldn't have much trouble. If you want your pick of at least 5 different species, Great Basin Serpentarium is a great option. And they're all captive bred. They aren't everywhere, but they're far from impossible to find, and they get a 3 out of 5 for availability, though again, that may go down in the near future. When it comes to upfront costs, cave geckos are shockingly not all that expensive, but again, that might go up in the near future. It's probably possible to get a leopard gecko for less than a cave gecko, but they're really not all that expensive yet. A bit more if you have to pay for shipping. It's totally possible to get a cave gecko right now for around $100, but expect that to at least double here shortly. You may pay more than that for the enclosure, most likely you will, but it's not going to break the bank either. You're going to need an enclosure, substrate, water bowl, calcium, vitamin supplements, hides, a heat source, and a thermostat, and you'll be pretty much good to go. Those studies have shown measurable benefits to leopard geckos from small amounts of UVB, so that would also probably be a good addition. It all adds up, but really, it doesn't get too much better than this. And so, especially since we went down a little bit on handleability, I'm going to stay at 5 out of 5 when it comes to upfront costs. Now, if you're looking for a really good way to house your cave gecko, or really any small type of reptile or amphibian, or especially things like tarantulas and other arthropods, Tarantula Cribs has some amazing products for you. In the past, I would have told you they make the nicest spider enclosures I've ever seen, and they still do. But they've recently started branching out into supplies for reptiles and amphibians. They're building larger enclosures. They just keep getting better and better. I love these front entry doors that they've been doing on a lot of their enclosures lately. They've got screen lids, and now the screen lids are warp resistant and they're scratch resistant. Same thing goes for the doors. They've got replaceable backgrounds. You just magnet them onto the back, and so you can switch them out anytime you like. These enclosures are spectacular, and it would be hard to imagine a better enclosure for a cave gecko than these. And so I'm grateful that Tarantula Cribs is the sponsor of today's video, and if you think that Tarantula Cribs are the types of enclosures that you're going to want for your animal, I've got even more great news for you today, because you can save 10% by using the discount code CLINT10 when you go to order. So again, that's CLINT10 when you order from Tarantula Cribs. And this is why overall we give Asian cave geckos a score of 4.4 out of 5. The truth is that in all ways except for availability, cave geckos are just as good of pets as their much more common cousins. Which means that they're one of the absolute best pets that you can get, and yet somehow you might be the only person that you know that has one. If what you want is a leopard gecko, but cooler, at least arguably, then the cave gecko might be the best pet lizard for you. And if you want to learn more about geckos generally, you should watch this video right now. As always, like and subscribe, and we hope to see you real soon. Or in the genus, let's see, Goniurosaurus. Is that right?
Close enough.
What is it? Goniurosaurus?
Yeah.
Okay.
Say it confidently, no one will question.
Oh, we'll see about that.
What if you just sat in my hat? Could we be friends? Whoop. Because I said particularly like 3 times there. That's my favorite word right now, I guess.
You're doing great, you spindly little guy. No dropping off of there, though. That's totally forbidden. You are funny how you move. I like you. Yeah, I like this lizard. This is a goofy one.